Good morning. Welcome to Matheson Library. I'm so glad to see such a great crowd on a Monday, rainy morning. My name is Amy Sullivan, and I am the Director of Library Services here at Matheson Library. We are delighted to have you all with us today, and it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Kim Russell, who is the coordinator of our English program, our English department here on campus, who was responsible for bringing this wonderful author here for us today. So please join me welcoming Kim Russell.
Good morning. So I sat down to write my introduction because I knew that I would be welcoming you all here and welcoming J.D. Wilkes to our campus. And it turned into a geek out fest real quickly. And I realized that I sounded like a really awkward, embarrassing fangirl as I was writing. So I decided instead, and I'm going to go ahead and use a little MLA format and cite my source. I stole from the webpage. So anyway, I did not write this, but it seemed a little bit easier, and it communicated the fact that I want you to understand that you are in the presence of some pretty serious awesomeness this morning, and I don't know that you necessarily realize that. A few years ago, my husband came home one night and he said, I've discovered the coolest band. And he got on YouTube and he showed it to me. And later on, I found out that this cool band actually had local roots, and I couldn't believe it. So I knew you before I knew that you were Paducah. And then I had found out that he was also a graduate of our college back when it had another name. And just the fact that we could bring him here today, I'm kind of in awe. Just such an amazing, multi-talented person. Okay, I'm geeking out. I'm going to stop. So here's just a little bit of information for you. J.D. Wilkes is an American musician, visual artist, author, filmmaker, and self-proclaimed Southern surrealist. He is an accomplished multi-instrumentalist, notably on harmonica and banjo, and I hope you get a chance to hear some of his music at some point. Having recorded with such artists as Merle Haggard, John Carter Cash, Mike Patton, Hank Williams III. His song Swamp Blood is one that you can hear on the True Blood soundtrack that was nominated for a Grammy. He's been compared to the likes of David Byrne, Iggy Pop, and Jerry Lee Lewis. I like that. He's a resident of Paducah, Kentucky, and you'll see him referred to as Colonel J.D. Wilkes because he is a Kentucky colonel, which is an honor bestowed by the governor. Aside from his career in music, he's also a published writer. You will see copies of his book, Barn Dances, and he's going to talk about that a little bit today, and also his first novel, which is The Vine That Ate the South, and you'll get a chance to hear about that as well. But before I turn it over to Mr. Wilkes, I wanted to give Tracy Jordan just a chance to say a few words. J.D. Wilkes is a dear friend of hers, and she's actually the one who let me know that he had written a novel, and we have been giddy groupies together for the past several months, anticipating this day and the opportunity for him to visit our college. So, Tracy Jordan, everybody.
I was Josh's English teacher, and I've told people this before, that the one talent that I think I have where genius is concerned is I can recognize it. So I said that, and my goal today is not to embarrass him by using the word genius over and over, but I was telling people on campus, there's this guy in my class, he's a genius, and they're like, okay. And the next thing you know, so was his music teacher, going around saying that, the art teachers. If we needed something like an illustration, a photograph, we would just go like, oh, somebody get Josh, because we knew he could do it. And if he couldn't do it, he wouldn't say he could. And so what I know is that for the last 20 years, he's done amazing things. You said amazing a lot. But the legendary Shack Shakers toured the world. But I still like to just say this. He's also toured with Robert Plant. And some of you are young, but Robert Plant, Led Zeppelin, that Robert Plant, that's pretty great. Mm-hmm. But what I got most excited about was when I heard about this little book and barn dances and jamborees across Kentucky, is that thing that I have so much respect for his idea that the audience is part of this thing too when you're a musician. And he said some pretty strong words about, if you're just playing in bars, what you're really doing is selling beer. And if you're just playing to people, you know, and making them listen, it's kind of a form of audience abuse. But a book, you know, your audience can shut you down when they want to. And I like that in his books, both of them. I never stopped. You know, it was just like, this is a really wonderful read. I think that this one, for anyone who respects roots music, you know, it's a must read. But I have to say this because, you know, he's with us today too. A nice thing that Josh has said about his wonderful parents is that they raised him to be an artist. And so I do have to tell you that his dad, Steve, is in the back of the room. He's one of my favorite people in the world, so there he is. And I'm so glad that he did raise Josh to be an artist. Kentucky is great. I say this in my classes until they give me the look, that, you know, we're an unexplainably amazing place, in my opinion. We're a smallish, poor state, yes, but we have the greatest athletes. I'm talking about boxing and basketball. We have the bravest medical research. We've transplanted hands and faces that we were told that couldn't be done. We have more flowing water, rivers and streams than any state except that big one called Alaska. That's amazing. And when you try to think then of the greatness in writing, Jesse Stewart sent me to college, even though he was dead. You know, he paid for it. Robert Penn Warren, who has a beautiful quote that I think applies to all of Josh's work. We walk on the thin crust of the present as if it were solid ground. But under Kentucky is also the biggest cave in the world, yes. And all this may be holding us together on this thin little crust of the present. Tree roots, yes, which figure prominently. I love that Josh notices there's just as much forest under the trees as there is above. And so this beautiful book, The Vine That Ate the South, has every ghost story that I can recall ever being told around these parts. Every kind of legend, it's in there. And so it's a wonderful month to sit and read this book, but it's good for any time. I love that he also said, kind of like Tolkien with those famous books, this could be just the beginning of a book set in Kentucky, and another book, and another book, and another. And then this one morning, and this is for Josh, he thinks I love Mason Canute. The Canute brothers are dangerous, and he does them such justice in this book that in a way it's one of my favorite parts. You can kind of look at them like dangerous animals and then close that book and put them away. Yes, but I love the book. And here he is, and I hope he's on his way down, and I hope he brought his harmonica. Josh.
Hey, y'all, how you doing? All right, that's for you, Tracy. I'm just a big dork. I don't know what they're talking about here. But they wanted me to talk about The Vine That Ate the South, which is the novel that I just wrote. But I wrote two books. One is nonfiction and one is fiction, of course. So I was like, well, I'd like to talk about both because I'm proud of them both, but what do they have in common? And was thinking about it, if I'm going to talk about both, what's the common denominator? It's culture, and it's regional or local culture that we all share. And so we'll go down the line here, and let's talk about this first. Music fans here. Everyone's a music fan, I'm assuming, you know. What are some of the genres that you prefer? What do you like? What do you? I know what you listen to, you know, but most of the time probably pop music or what's going on? New country. Wheelhouse Rousters, yeah. Well, they're in the book, and that's kind of the genre I'm talking about. Is music before pop culture, and music before bars, saloons, where you had you've got a band and electricity. Music used to serve a different purpose. Now it's to sell a personality and commodities. And all of this is kind of a recent development. And I became sucked into that world trying to get famous and all this stuff. And then as I'm working towards that, kind of getting ahead, kind of failing, putting out records, I'm just getting tired of it, you know, because it seems false, it seems fake, and I've just started to fatigue on the whole idea of it, and then I started thinking more and more about Kentucky. Because I'm over in Europe, I'm down in Texas or California, I'm like missing home, getting homesick. Like, what am I doing this for? And so I just started getting homesick and thinking about all those old banjos, those old men out there in the woods, you know, just picking and grinning. They're not there to sell CDs. They're not there to get famous on the MTV or anything. And it's like, well, that seems kind of refreshing at this point. And like, so I started to like formulate this idea of I want to write about that. I want to like give them like a Valentine. I want to like give back to Kentucky because it's like it's my home, and I'm so far away from home. So I just, when I got back, I just got in my car, even though I just was in a van for a month, and I just drove from Paducah to Pikeville, and I went all around. I made a couple of trips, and I was just looking for places like this, just little barns where people get together, pick and grin. They're not asking for money, and what it is I think it's something ancient in all of us to want to connect with something, an identity and a culture that's all our own. That you know, it's just the opposite of bullshit. And I just want to get back to normal. But I've never known normal because I was born in the 70s. You know, I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s, and I graduated here in 93 or something. So I'm like, I don't know what that old world is. You know, you go to Cracker Barrel and you look on the walls, it's like, what are these things? You know, I don't even know what that implement is hanging on the wall there. And it's all fake. So I was like, I want to get to something real. And so that's what I just started going down the line here. And I started learning something about America along the way. That something happened. And it happened in 1927. 1927 was when officially the old agrarian homesteading, farming, self-sufficient way of life, that was the pioneer way, it came to an end as a majority of the people involved in it. A majority of the people, all of a sudden it flip-flopped to people employed in the system because you had your technology coming out of all the wars. The Civil War had destroyed the agrarian system, not agrarianism, but it did lead to more industry with the railroads and all that. So what happened was just technology happening after World War I, a big boom. A second boom happened after World War II, and all of a sudden you're off to the races. You go from railroads to interstates. You go from ice boxes and what are they called, pie safes, to refrigerators and microwaves, odor eaters, Pop-Tarts, air conditioning, all this stuff, you know. But stuff we take for granted, but what's happening to us is we're getting further and further away from those old rustic, organic things that make us feel human. And the music and all that, and pop culture, it all dazzles you, and like you're going off into no man's land now. So I'm like, I was a sucker, and I got sucked into that, and I wanted to just touch base with what all that stuff in Cracker Barrel is. So let's go down my road trip here, and this is over there in Berea, close to Berea, Renfro Valley. This is one of the longest running barn dances where these people get together and pick. And a lot of these people are like 70, 80, 90 years old. So they're not cool, but there's something cool about them because they're almost like time capsules, human time capsules of like Depression era, pre-pop culture sensibilities. So then they gather in these barns. They do it around here too. But this is the longest running one, and it was a radio program. The second or third longest running, I can't remember, I have to look at the book. Second only to the Grand Ole Opry is the longest running radio program. It's still on the air. And that's been up there long. And see, we have one here too. But it's not really, these little Opry houses that we have are kind of like the modern version of the old barn raisings and gatherings that they had in the old days. If you go to the Kentucky Opry, it's that old kind of music, but you're sitting in like theater seating. It's like plush seating and air conditioning, and it's still, it's a vestige of the old days that meets the posh things we expect nowadays. There were a couple of places that were actual barns with dirt floors. This is where bluegrass music was invented, and it's not that far from here. Rosine, Kentucky is over by Beaver Dam, and right across the street, like if I'm there, I am there looking across the street to the railroad tracks. There's a shed over there that Bill Monroe used to sit in and get lessons from this black guy'd come up from New Orleans, and he'd teach him how to play guitar, and he taught him all the finger picking styles. He also taught Merle Travis, and in this one county, between Muhlenberg County and Ohio County, 2 styles of country music were invented. Travis picking, guitar, and bluegrass music. That's another thing about Western Kentucky, Tracy, that we have to be thankful for, because it spawned 2 unique genres of country music. Dirt floor, they got Christmas lights in there. You can see there's a bunch of old timers in there, but I kind of have this old man fetish. It's like I just want to talk to them and hear their stories. So I go to these places because I don't know. Scotty Henson. Does anyone know who Scotty Henson is? He just passed away this year. But he had a little log cabin there in Marshall County, and he'd sit in there, and you could see his hand it's all stove up. He had a stroke or something. But he still gave banjo lessons in that little shed, that little cabin, up into his dying day. And these are the kind of people I want to talk to. And I've interviewed them, and I've put them up on Vimeo and YouTube, and I just think it's a fascinating subject because it fulfills something cultural that I feel cheated out of. This is Stanley Walker here, and he plays over in Grand Rivers. All of this is easy to go see, just right down the road, and it's like touching the past whenever you get to hear their music and hear their stories. Now, he played for Rock and Ray Smith, who recorded for Sun Studios, which is the label that Elvis and Jerry Lee and Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash all first recorded at. He was there too, and he knew all those guys. And Gene Shepard, he was the music director on the Grand Ole Opry for Gene Shepard. These are names you might want to know if you're interested in this kind of subject. Charlie Stamper just passed away this year too. It's been a bad year. Everyone was saying 2016 was so bad for celebrities and musicians passing away. Well, this has been a worse year for me because all of these Kentucky old-timers that were carriers of an old tradition are passing away, and there's really no one that can fill their shoes. I'll try, but I won't be anything like these guys. Charlie was telling me the first time he saw automobile. I've grown up with supermarkets and cars. I don't know a world without these things. He was out there barefoot in the mud seeing his very first vehicle, like probably a Model T or something, stuck in the mud in the Depression, having to be pulled out by mules. His father made him a banjo out of a stump. You know, you just don't, that's just not a world we know. And and then I got to know him and recorded him, and at age 85, he put out his first solo record. Now, his brother's in the Bluegrass Hall of Fame, but he didn't choose a line of show business like his brother did. So I thought that was a shame. So we went out and recorded him in his living room, and this album came out a couple of years ago. So one of the things he could scratch off his bucket list. So Charlie, and I spoke at his funeral, and I was crying the whole time. I couldn't stop. It was just, I should never do that again. But Charlie and Scotty and Stanley Walker, these are local legends that if you don't know people like that, at least talk to your grandparents or your great-grandparents if they're still alive, and try to get some ideas of how life used to be, because it'll make you just have more perspective on your present and your future. Earl passed away this year, and he was down in Marshall County. Earl was a character. he didn't really understand music much. He had sounded like Ernest Tubb when he sang. He was a great singer, but he had this shed in the woods, and you'd go out there. I mean, like, you might get shot maybe, but you get out there. He had made this shed, but he poured the concrete down the hill, like for the foundation, but he didn't use like a level or anything or any kind of like struts or anything. So when you walk, it's like this. It's like a fun house. When you go in, the ceiling's this low, and they've got like 2x4s holding up the ceiling, and there's a big potbelly stove over there. It's like a fire trap waiting to happen. He's on stage. Song's in the key of G, right? But that's the only chord he plays throughout the whole song. And if you're a musician, you know that's wrong. But it was a glorious mess, but it was real. And the opposite of CMT and Country Music Awards, which is, for me, that's awesome. I don't know. It's just real, and that's what I'm looking for. Rough around the edges. WKYX, WKYQ started off as a radio station that had live music, just like WPAD. That was in the days before there were so many records and CDs and things that you could just slap on a turntable and play. You actually had to have bands come in and perform the music. And this is Fonzie Davis over here, the clown. The bass player was always the clown. And he was like, he's basically like the Greg Dunker of his day, or the Lou Jaton. And but anyway, I just love all this stuff. I grew up around antiques. I grew up around interesting people, and I moved around a lot. So I have a taste for this kind of stuff. If you're into like old-timey stuff, there's a lot of history to be learned around here, and it'll make you appreciate Paducah even more the more you dig into it. Let's see what we got here. I think that's it for that. So I will read, actually I'm going to read a censored thing that was taken out of the book for you. And it involves my dad. He's got to leave. Everybody get a piece of cake? I can't believe they did that. This is called My Time in the Medicine Show. Since the days of the Kerosene Trail, the medicine show format, you know what a medicine show is? Well, I'll get to that. Of a free show with advertisements has endured in all aspects of American media. From radio to television to the internet, even early radio jamborees were brought to its rural listeners by some sort of bottled nostrum. The Grand Ole Opry once advertised Hadacol, a panacea for the post-war generation. Today, the Opry pitches a similar product, jogging in a jug, some kind of colored water cure-all. Modern-day pitchmen hawking kitchen gadgets at county fairs aspire to hit it big on TV infomercials and QVC. However, a handful of historically oriented practitioners tried to capture the past by reenacting old spiels. Doc Dazzle's Hocus Pocus Medicine Show and Dr. Trinidad's Medicine Show, both from North Carolina, are contemporary attempts at demonstrating the way things were. A similar minstrel medicine show reenactment existed in the late 1980s in Western Kentucky. This was the first professional group I ever played music with, but it was an experience of a lifetime, but not in a good way. It happened in Eddyville, Lyon County, Kentucky to be exact. My first ever real paid gig, and it was in a prison. Not just any prison, though. It was the Kentucky State Penitentiary, AKA the Castle on the Cumberland, and I was all of a mere 16 years old. Here's how it all came about. Moments after playing harmonica at the teen talent show at Clay Campbell's Kentucky Opry, a local music scout plucked me from the exiting crowd. He said he worked for the county tourism board and was putting together an act. He told me he had already assembled a quartet of singers to entertain Lakes area campers and hikers. It was a sort of a modern-day non-racist minstrel show he called the Popularity Showboat. The guys and gals sang broad renditions of bawdy old river tunes and Stephen Foster songs. The fellows wore top hats and bow ties, and the gals danced the can-can in petticoats and garters. Instead of snake oil, they handed out travel brochures. It was a cute little gimmick, but despite their tight act, they were still in need of a distraction during costume changes. That's where I would come in. I was to keep them happy with my bluesy harmonica stylings while the singers ducked off stage, slipping out of their dark waistcoats and into their slightly darker waistcoats. And so without a single rehearsal, I agreed and hit the road with a popularity showboat for my first professional show ever. But it wasn't to entertain the sun-kissed campers along the lakes. No, not that day. As I said before, we were headed deep into the dark heart of the Eddyville State Penitentiary. Cool, I thought, but little did I know. Outside the prison, armed guards looked down from the looming stone turrets where razor wire snaggled about. The gates yawned wide, welcoming us with its iron teeth. Our tour van slid slowly into the tunneled underbelly of the weather-beaten concrete. Summer sunlight quickly vanished as we plunged deeper into inner darkness, only to reemerge at the checkpoint booth. Here we exited the van and received our orders not to fraternize with the prisoners. Just do your show and get the hell out, the guard advised. We were then escorted to an outdoor pavilion, a sort of covered picnic area in the middle of the courtyard. All around us were the 4 stone tiers that comprised the prison's inner quad. One could see the color-coded jumpsuits of chain gangs marching at gunpoint along the upper decks. I made sure not to look anyone in the eye. Thankfully, the prisoners seemed more interested in the can-can girls than me. The show was starting, and I readied myself for the visual cue. The crowd of small-time offenders looked on from the picnic tables just yards away. Yee-haw! Yelled the jailbirds every time a shapely leg kicked from beneath a crinoline. Yes, they were ornery, but on average, relatively civil. Prison guards looked on with blank stares. Then came my turn. As I stepped forward to play the virgin notes of my first ever paid performance, I still can't believe that, I felt the slightest tinge of stage fright. Suddenly, I had zero confidence in my ability to entertain, and I panicked. Every note seemed to fall flat, and let's be honest, unaccompanied harmonica music can be annoying, even when it's played well, so I freaked out. I scanned the crowd and spotted a certain African-American inmate who just so happened to be holding a guitar. I guess he was small-time enough to be trusted with one. So I called him up to jam. What was I thinking? He nodded, walked up, and the two of us started our own pickin' party right there in front of everybody. It was like ebony and ivory, but in prison. Well, suffice it to say, this did not sit well with the Aryan Brotherhood. A group of skinheads got up and staged a mass walk-off in protest of such racial harmony. All at once, voices were mumbling, guards were hollering, walkie-talkies were blaring, shivs were sharpening, and we were in trouble. We were in trouble. Right before a riot could have broken out, we were scooped up and shoved back in our van. Yep, that's all, folks. The popularity showboat was pulling up anchor and sailing for home. But not before I got the tongue lashing of a lifetime from the screws. In retrospect, I guess I'm lucky to be alive. Back across the lakes at a Marshall County Pizza Hut, my dad showed up to pick me up for my first gig. How'd it go, he asked. I got fired for inciting a race war in prison. Well, he replied, supper's almost ready. So, anyway, there you go. It's true. He disputes that last little line, but you can make things up when you write. But before I move on to the novel, is there any questions about this kind of stuff here? Is anyone interested in this? Is it too hokey? Q&A. And I don't know why I didn't put that slide in now. It was in a ghost town in Magan, Kentucky. It's not on any map. Magan, Ohio County, M-A-G-A-N. Maybe you can find it. Maybe Google Earth has it. I don't know. But I was lost. They told me, turn left at the fire station that burned down. So that's ironic. I think I can find that. So yeah, I went, then I'm off-roading it through a cornfield kind of thing, and then I'm left and right over a hill, and I finally find it. I don't know where I am, but it's a ghost town. It used to be a stagecoach stop, and what they have there in the old general store is a square dance. And it's like 100 people show up just out of nowhere, like crawling out for rocks. I don't know where these people come from. They've got the old guys out there doing this, and they got bottle caps nailed to their shoes and boots, and they got little kids out there, and they got like these hipsters that come out too, you know, like teenagers and college kids. They're out there learning how to do all that stuff too, and just laughing. And the band was over there, and I got to sit in and play banjo with them. And the caller, you know, square dance, you got a caller, you know, swing your partner around and around. You know, this guy's name was Elvis Doolin, and he was the sheriff of the county. And he was just like Andy Griffith. I mean, he was just like smiling like, you know, just total awesome Kentucky Southern sheriff. Not the mean kind, but the cool kind. And he played the spoons, and he called, and it was real dark in there, and had all these feed bags up on the wall, and UK basketball banners. I mean, it was just like real. It wasn't trying to be Cracker Barrel. It was just, that's what they like. And it was just, I just couldn't believe. I felt like I'd gone back 100 years. And it was in a ghost town. If you can find it, it's in the book, and I kind of describe where it was. But yeah, that was the best one. It's called the Wildwood Flower. So, my favorite.
So, how do you find out about all these little holes in the wall?
Well,
In a new place?
word of mouth. Some of them are savvy enough to have them up on the internet, and then I go to one, and then they tell me about another, and then I go out there looking like this, and I don't know if they're going to kill me or not, you know. So I always bring my harmonica, because that always puts them in a good mood. They go sit in with the band, and they're like, "Oh, where'd you come from? Paducah? Oh, yeah." Paducah, that's what they call it, Paducah. And so I always was able to win them over by playing the harmonica and getting more information, and so they knew that I wasn't trying to exploit them. And then when I was done with the book, I got them all a copy, so they knew that I was there to make fun of them, you know. I lovingly joke, but they'd make fun of themselves too. I mean, I love the humor. It's a different kind of humor. I love the music. It's just real and earthy and unpretentious, and that was the break I needed from being a punk rock guy. So, I feel better now. Anybody else, any questions? Because I can move on. Yeah, I don't know how to do the computer. Who made the cake? DQ? Walmart? Oh, they did a good job.
For our next Q&A session, by the way, when he offers more questions, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to run the microphone to you all so everyone can hear. No problem. No, not at all. No problem.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So this book I wrote and illustrated. Thank you. And so if you get a copy, there's got pictures in it. You can color them, you know. This was an old piece of line art that I kind of like adapted for the cover. That's supposed to be what they call the white Fang, and it's like a Bigfoot panther thing that lives in the South out in the woods. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but supposedly it sings like a woman, like a banshee, and you can never catch her or it. And it's always 50 feet ahead of you if you see it going down the road. You can never catch up to it, disappears, and re-emerges 50 feet ahead. Like I said, this book is about folklore, ghost stories, all the stories your grandma might have taught you about, grandpa, things you might have heard, and oh, that's crazy, or that's cool. Creepy bedtime stories, dreams. It's a fantasy novel, but a Southern fantasy novel. I took all those folk tales that I knew growing up, and I tried to novelize it. So like these two characters are experiencing all the things they always heard about out in the woods of Kentucky. They come to life. Kind of like Frodo and Sam and Lord of the Rings, how they go through the woods trying to get to Mordor, and all those old Anglo-Saxon Norse stories. Tolkien was able to bring those to life so two characters could experience that. I thought, well, we've got monsters here too, and we've got our own flavor of speech and accents and dialects, and I just tried to capture the flavor. The White Thing is just one of the many characters. I've got the Mothman in there, the Bell Witch from Tennessee. I try to pack it pretty full of crazy characters that I'm sure you've heard about growing up. Originally, it was going to be a graphic novel, so I set about handwriting the entire book. But I figured I'd be about 80 years old by the time I got done with it, so I was like, I gave up after chapter 4, and I just decided I'd go ahead and try to send it to some publishers, typewritten and illustrated. And I guess for about 6 months, maybe 9 months, it was rejection letter after rejection letter. No one would even read it. And then I uploaded it to some server thing that just kind of puts it out there for you to everybody. And those things work, evidently. Forget what it's called, but I got a hook, and they flipped out. And then the version they had was not ready really to even be read. I go back and look at what they saw. They saw potential in what I was trying to write about, and thank goodness. And they didn't even know there's illustrations. I said, well, I was trying to make a comic book first, and then they said, well, let's take a look at that. So I sent it to them. I said, are you kidding me? We got to put the pictures in the book. So that's how it became an illustrated novel. There's another example of this Madstone is almost like the ring in Lord of the Rings. It's the amulet, the thing sought after, the controversial item that is being transported. And what that is a piece of blanched, petrified deer cud that's been regurgitated into a rock. And they say that if you apply the rock to a snake bite or a dog bite or whatever, it will draw the bacteria and the poison out, and it will heal you. And this is an actual item that's specific to the South and to the Cherokee people. So I tried to research about not just Paducah, not just Kentucky, not just the South, but also Native American traditions and folklore, as well as the Appalachian stuff and the Delta stuff, because we're kind of more of the Delta here, you know. We're in a great spot because Kentucky you've got Appalachia over here, and your foothills in the middle, and then you've got this prehistoric beach that we're on right now. And we're more like the Mississippi Delta, so we get a lot of that jazz and blues coming up from New Orleans, but the mountain music comes trickling down the Ohio, down those foothills. So that's why you have the wheelhouse rousters, the solid rocket boosters, the legendary shack shakers, because we're not just pure bluegrass. We mix in that rockabilly and that blues too, because we're the epicenter, I think, famously so. I mean, bluegrass was invented here, Travis picking. We just need to be thankful for all the cool stuff we have here, as well as the mix of folklore. There's Chief Paducah. This is the sketch for the painting I did at, what's the pizza place? Mellow Mushroom. If you go over to the side, basically there's the horizontal version of this drawing there. And in the book, I pretend Chief Paducah's real. I don't know if he was or not, but I kind of made up an alternate universe of Western Kentucky. And so if there's any factual errors in there, it's just because I've created a parallel universe version of the Jackson Purchase. So he's real according to me. And there's my Tolkien-esque map and like I was just saying, it doesn't really match anything that you could, if you were to compare this to an actual map of Jackson Purchase, it doesn't go. But it's a dream version of Paducah. And so you could see, but there are some things here. There really is a Carter's Mill ghost town out by Simpsonia. And I was scared they were going to tear it down, but it turns out they're really fixing it up. So that's cool. That's getting preserved. If you go like down Oaks Road, like you're going to Simpsonia, look off to the left where you cross over Clark's River, there are these old buildings. There's an old hotel, an old blacksmith shop out in the woods, and Carter's Mill, and we used to drive by it going out to my cousins all the time. And you were the one that pointed it out to me the first time. Carter's Mill, and then some other things, you know, like this is based on the Dogtown Bridge outside of Benton, and this is based on this girl that I knew. We rescued a pit bull, and we tried to find a place someone to take them off our hands, and found this girl that she actually had Great Danes, and she made little saddles for them, and she would ride them around Simpsonia. It's like, well, that's cool. I'm going to put that in the book. And this is her dog path. She's beat a trail, and that path ends up kind of saving the day at the end. No, spoiler alert. So, and I don't know where I got the idea, but what they're looking for ultimately is this house that's been grown over by kudzu to the point to where the dead people inside, they died in their bed, the kudzu wraps around their bodies, and the kudzu just keeps going and going and going, and it transports their bodies through the window and hangs them up in the trees on display. So they're looking for this just for curiosity's sake. And so here's the couple here, and this is the house. So it's almost like a maze they have to go through to get there. And then this here, Dooney's Treetop Getaway. Dooney is the village idiot. He's the idiot man-child, because you can't write a Southern book without a Faulknerian idiot man-child. And he ends up factoring into the story. And what he's done is he's made this path in the tops of the trees of planks that he can run along and bounce off of, like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And he can kind of climb around in the trees and go from one to another. And this is based on a guy I knew down in Louisiana when we lived there. And because he had done the same thing. And me and my buddy were out there one day, and then it was like, we're like, what the heck? We look up, his brother's up there in the top of the tree trying to take a shit on us. And I look up there, it's like, oh my God. So like, there's a lot of traumatic things that have happened to me that I've got to work out for your entertainment. So Dooney is the idiot man-child, and he ends up being a big figure in the book. So, and I'm gonna read something real quick, and then I'll remember to do the thing. Because they made this cake, I've got to read about the kudzu. I don't go by notes, as you can tell, but I just like to wing it. I'd rather hear from you, but I did mark my place here. But here we go. Here's look, class. Can you see the kudzu? I tried to put textbook style figures and illustrations in the book also to make it more interesting. This is all about kudzu, which is the vine that ate the South. The lobed mountain child. Before we saddle up, Carver and I stopped to take a leak. Through the branches of my bathroom, I can see the banks of Clark's River. They are blanketed with yet more thick green kudzu. Their leaves hang like pennants, leathery, languid, and full of ticks. Blackjack vines lace through the treetops like circus wires. Woolly mammoths and brontosauruses parade in gray-green shapes. The devil's topiary. Kudzu, a.k.a. Prairiea montana lobata, is of Chinese descent, and as such has a good reason to want to do us in, communist plot that it must be. Deceptively, it begins as just a tiny thing, its little runners spread via vegetative reproduction, producing shoots that root along its hosts. The seeds it sheds in autumn lie dormant for years, long after the pest has been thought destroyed. Yet once again it stirs deep below our boots in the loam and gloam of the shadowlands. And although deaf and blind, it maneuvers around the urns of sleeping saints through the soil of the biblical Sheol. Here the earth is churned by the weed's slow sinew. Like a constrictor, it girdles the good roots around it. Then up it slips, piercing the topsoil into daylight. Climbs to the treetops to unfurl its shroud of dragon scales and kills the trees with shade. Oaks, pines, walnuts, sycamores, they're the good guys. They stand as strong as they can against their kudzu cousin, digging their feet in to do battle. Because as you may know, the roots of trees often run deeper than the branches grow wide. It's true. If we could view a cross-section of Earth's crust, we'd see how the woods above cannot compare to the wilderness growing underground. Believe it or not, this vast, gripping web is what footholds us to the planet. It reinforces our topsoil and gives humans a place to stand. Killer kudzu, however, seems hell-bent on loosening these underpinnings, weakening our purchase, and sending us all flying into outer space. Interesting enough, kudzu is edible. Folks down here have been known to cook it into a salad or a salad, boil it like collard greens, and douse it with Tabasco to help it go down. But let's be honest, kudzu was more likely to eat you. We're really not that different from plants. Consider the fractal makeup of the human body. Observe how each of our extremities branch into smaller parts. Arms and legs grow out from a trunk. Hands and feet grow out from arms and legs. Fingers and toes grow out from hands and feet. So are we that much superior to kudzu, a plant with infinite extremities? A plant that triumphs over tall columned verandas and mighty castle spires, over entire empires? But not long after the footprints of man have faded into dust, will kudzu and all the other green things of the world join forces to stake back their claim, like mold overtaking a corpse. After all, it was their fruit in the garden that first tricked us. Now they wait, biding their time for our sins to find us, waiting for the day when our last city is toppled and they can finally pounce. They will release their runners to go sailing through our ruins and into our bodies, spanning the globe round and round to bind the planet into one giant Irish knot. But let's be a good sport about it. Let us bring forth once again the forbidden fruit of Eden, wring its nectar down, its red nectar down in succulent currents, replenish to the brim the very holy grail of Christ, and have a toast. Remarkable old wizards, warped, twisting elders, in the end they will kick our butts. So to the victor, the spoils.
I know we're going to have a question and answer real quick, but I know some of you all will sneak away. But don't forget, if you haven't read the book, please do. It's a must. If you need a copy of the book, we have them for sale. Todd Mitchell's going to wave right there. He has books for sale today, so please stop by. I know J.D. will be glad to autograph if you own a copy already, or you purchase one today. He'll be glad to autograph afterwards too. But now we're ready for questions, and please give me just a second to get there so you can talk in that microphone.
Anybody?
Anyone?
Anybody have a story their granny or their grandpa told them that could go good with the book? You do? Okay. You got talking. Phil Donahue, everybody.
I love a good microphone. What about when I was growing up in far western Kentucky, I like to refer to it as the West Coast of Kentucky. It's as far as you can go on the Mississippi River, down around Columbus, Belmont State Park.
Okay.
We used to talk when we were kids a lot about the shapes, because there was, I swear to God, one that looked like an elephant on the way to my family's old
The shapes, yeah, the devil's topiary, that's what I call it. Yeah.
Yes, right. Did you reference that?
I did. I described they had to go hide through them. They're using the kudzu to hide in, so I described it as them running into the cloaks of medieval plague doctors. And so that was one. So throughout the book, there's different descriptions of what they look like. Elephants and brontosauruses.
Have you ever heard of the Golo Ghost?
Was it
The Golo Ghost?
in Golo? Now tell me about it.
I've heard my mom and some of the other ones that grew up in that area back in the, say, the mid-'50s. It was actually a person, but he was never caught. And he roamed the area of Golo, Kentucky. Of course, I guess you know where that's at.
Yeah, huh?
And he would sneak in people's houses when they wasn't home, and he'd cook and eat. And he would steal clothing and coal and different things, but he was never caught. It happened about I think they said about 2 years.
So it was like a human being that they ended up describing as a ghost because they couldn't catch him.
Nobody ever, they knew it was a guy,
Huh.
but he was never caught.
He'd just sneak in and make breakfast.
And he would
take
steal
off.
clothes off the clothesline, and steal buckets of coal and stuff from
I dig
just
that.
houses. Evidently, he watched everybody. He knew everybody's
Everybody's
routine.
got a story like this. Every town, I mean, there's no gathering them all, you know, it's a thing. That's what keeps me going, though, is to try. And there's, it's the same with the barn dances. It's like I keep discovering more and more of them. There's no way you can get to them all because every nook and cranny of Kentucky's got them, every holler. And it's just people get together and pick, and it's like I can't chronicle them all. I was bemoaning this to someone, like, I wish I could get to all of these things. And they're like, well, that's okay, honey, you're just getting the ball rolling. So if anyone else knows stories like this, I just think it's important to write them down before it all goes out of our collective conscious because of pop culture and the phones and all that. You know, all that just ends up pushing everything away, and every generation's like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox, culturally speaking. So I just like, and that's just the way of life. I know that's how it is, but I just want to be one of those guys that just like, okay, this is what I know, and I'm going to put this down, and that maybe it'll live maybe 2 more generations before the next person maybe comes along and helps out. So, but anybody know any other local legends?
I knew the Golo Ghost.
You did?
Yeah, he went to Murray with me in the 60s, and he drove an old pickup truck. He had a license plate on the front of his car.
You knew who it was?
I don't remember his name.
But you
Golo
solved the
Ghost
mystery?
was on this license plate, but the lettering was all strange looking, so you had to really know what you were.
Well, mystery solved.
Anyway, at least that's what he said he was. He said, I'm the Golo Ghost. And
That's my dad. One of the stories you told me about when you were little made it into the book, fictionalized. When you were out, y'all were visiting your horse out in Calvert City, and you cut yourself on the barbed wire, and you ran into the woods or something, and there was a dwarf couple, little people, that had a tiny house in Marshall County in the woods. And they bound up your wounds for you, and I guess he was a doctor. The ceiling was low, and yeah, the roof was low. It was like a little mini house. For a kid to get in, it'd be all right, but it's not there anymore, is it? Yeah, but that's in the book too. Where, like, one of the places they run and hide is that the little people house. You got to remember, I'm on a campus here. You know? Yeah, I love those stories, and that's real. That's not even a legend. You know, so anybody, you know, you got some ghost stories in you. I just remembered we're on TV, and I just said some bad words, so you have to bleep those. Just trying to make it hip for the kids, you know. PG-13.
I have a ghost story.
Speak
and
up.
There was a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but it's like a strange first name, like Montel, maybe, who would go around and collect Kentucky ghost stories, but just fragments. So it always made me sad, but he wanted this story because to me it was oral history, but my great-granny, Granny Hayden, when she was 16 years old, they lived between the rivers. So, you know, no electricity there even till the 60s. But in the 20s, she was like a teenager, and her sister was like a year younger. She got really sick. It was January, and there was ice everywhere. and Granny Hayden's name was Emma. So they knew Emma could ride a horse no matter what. So they saddle up the horse, and Emma's going to try to make it to Catawba to the doctor, which meant crossing the river on ice.
Whoa.
So she could have died. So she's like riding her horse, and she told me this when I was really little. And she said, you know, I was just as peaceful. And she said, when I got to that old river, you know, I looked back, and from this high point, she could see the window of their tiny little house. Her sister was upstairs sick. And she said, I saw a little light, and she said, I saw that light move around and come out the window and fly out. So
Whoa.
to her, it was like she just turned and went back home. And she said, I was in no rush at all, because that was how she said goodbye.
That reminds me, I could go on and on and on. You just have to cut me off because there's so many stories. My buddy Lane Hendrickson, he's a atheist, doesn't believe in the supernatural, will debunk anything that we're saying here. However, there was a thing he saw once that he still can't explain, and he has to be honest. And to his credit, he's like, I don't know what that was. But it was he was driving down the Purchase Parkway like you're going to Murray past the backside of Benton. You know, that long stretch, Bayou Chene, I think. And he saw a blue hovering, glowing disc, not a globe or a swamp glass, but a disc just hovering there like a UFO, or he didn't know what it was, but he stopped and he just stared at it forever, and he got chills. He got a sense that it was something evil about it. And it was just out there. Now, it could have been swamp gas, but he just said it was more like a disc, and it was just inexplicable, you know. So these things happen to even like non-believers too. So, and I've seen my fair share of stuff that makes me a believer. I don't know about you, but these river cities are notoriously haunted, and I tend to believe in all that. Like if you go to New Orleans, River City, these French river cities, St. Louis, Savannah, Charleston. If you go there, you feel it when you go down in those old brick downtowns with the cobblestone, and it's just something it's almost palpable. You start to almost become a believer just setting foot in those towns. You know, something to it. Louisville's the same way. So.
Hey, I've heard my grandfather tell that same thing, seeing a light.
Seeing
out
it.
coon hunting.
Was it blue?
I think it was. But he always said it was something from like Fort Campbell military something.
Oh, yeah, well, it could have been.
I've heard that exact same story from my grandfather down in, I think he coon hunted down.
It could be a military thing, you know. I'm not above debunking it, you know. It could be a foxfire, or what do they call it? Mineral lights is another word for it.
He just didn't want us to think that he was scared. That's why he said that.
Oh, yeah.
He was scared.
Right. It scared me. But you got to, that's good. That's good enough. Unless y'all got a story. This is fun. We should dim the lights. I'll be back tonight, and I'll have other stories, and I'll bring the banjo, and y'all have fun. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.